Silence your cell phones, by the way, everybody, please. Yep, we'll be getting started in just a second. So,
Greg, would you be able to lift that your mic stand a little straight? That part that goes out, the back part, you can make it straight, so it won't be obstructing this man's face. Perfect.
It's okay. I mean, my face is built for radio.
This is the Only in Miami show, and I'm your host, Grant Stern. You can find me on Twitter at Grant Stern and everything about the show, including a special live webcast of this broadcast and video at www.onlyinmiami.co. Tonight's broadcast is the first 6 to 7 p.m. broadcast for the Only in Miami show of what will be many, as we will be changing our time slot to 6 to 7 p.m. beginning September 5th, that is Labor Day. Tonight, we have a special broadcast brought to you by the Salem Radio Network and 880 The Biz. And we will be debating two Democrats who are seeking the primary nomination for Florida's 40th Senate District, which covers Kendall, it covers Richmond Heights, it covers Perrine, it covers the west side of South Miami, and quite a few points nearby, bordered by US 1, Bird Road, west to Chrome Avenue, and south to 184th Street. It is a brand new Florida Senate District. And I would like to introduce to our listening audience State Senator Dwight Bullard. He is the chairperson of the Miami-Dade Democratic Party and sitting state senator, as well as his challenger, Andrew Korge, who is a first-time Democratic candidate in South Florida. The debate will follow a fairly rigid format intended to bring substance to these discussions and avoid the kinds of fight for airtime moments that you have seen in national debates on television. This is a radio broadcast debate, and both candidates have been apprised of the rules and the format in advance, but none of the questions. So I would like to start by giving Mr. Korge the floor for a 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Grant, and it's great being here. And Senator Bullard, good to see you again. My name's Andrew Korge. I'm a candidate for state senate. And, you know, when you run for office, a lot of people ask you, why did you decide to run? Why would you subject yourself to the negativity of politics? And it's an ugly game, that's for sure. And the answer is very simple. Having kids changed me. From the moment my daughter Olivia was born, all I could think about was what type of world are my kids and everyone's kids going to inherit. And when I took a look around at what's been going on, it's pretty clear our government's broken. Things are messed up. Our priorities are completely backwards. At a time when there's so much violence in the streets, what do the politicians do? They give military equipment from Iraq to the police. At a time when our schools are struggling, what do the politicians in Tallahassee do? They give money to billionaires for their sports stadiums. And this stuff makes me sick. I want to see some change in government. I believe we desperately need to elect new leaders who have a 21st century vision and some new ideas, and that's why I'm running, Grant.
Alrighty, you do have another 40 seconds left.
That's okay. That's all I'm here.
Alrighty. State Senator Bullard, thank you for joining us. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you for having us, Grant, and good evening to the listeners. And I'm hopeful that that folks listening will pay attention and be very mindful of the answers given today. I'm State Senator Dwight Bullard. I currently represent District 39, which covers a very large swath of South Florida, running from the West Coast all the way down to the Keys. Of course, redistricting has changed the nature of the district, and so the district in which I've resided in now for 30 plus years is the district that I choose to represent, which is going to be District 40. And so I look forward to continuing to represent the people that I've grown close to over my time in the legislature. More importantly, my friends and neighbors who I've grown up around. My commitment to the district is sound and absolute. Since I've been in the House of Representatives going back to 2008, I've had the pleasure of calling South Dade my district. But I inherited, if you will, from two of the greatest teachers that I could ever have, and both my parents, who also held elected office. And much like they did, I choose to serve with levels of integrity and responsiveness to the people that I have a commitment to here in District 40. I look forward to continuing to be a public servant.
Thank you, gentlemen. So I am going to address the first question to Senator Bullard, who will have 2 minutes to respond. Then Mr. Korge will have 2 minutes to answer, and 30-second rebuttal by the senator, and that is the format for this evening's debate until we get to the lightning round, where there are 1 minute question and answers and 30-second rebuttals. So, 1 minute rebuttals in this round. My first question is, for residents of Kendall who are suffering under unbearable traffic, how would you, Senator Bullard, be able to impact Tallahassee in a way that will help alleviate the traffic and transit concerns of Kendall residents and South Dade residents in particular?
Well, I have to recognize the great work of one of my colleagues, and that is Representative Keone McGee, who's really taken trying to draw down state dollars as well as bundle federal dollars for rail expansion down to the southern end of our county. I've signed on, as well as many of the mayors from the South Florida area, in terms of wanting to bring either commuter rail or light rail through the South Dade corridor along US 1. One interesting thing that I've also looked at and will continue to pursue in hopes of drawing down dollars is the use of the railway system along the 137th Avenue corridor going towards the western boundary of that area. And so once we're able to attract light rail dollars, it kind of opens the door for grand opportunities like the US 1 corridor and like the western corridor to bring down light rail. I have to give, again, great shout outs to the great public service we have down in South Dade, because when you look at places like Cutler Bay and Palmetto Bay that have already started using golf carts, allowing their circulator buses around their communities, you're already starting to see an alleviation of some of the traffic burden. So we want to carry that over.
Those circulators are paid with county dollars from a state sales tax increase.
Well, the circulators I'm referring to are actually paid through a local option that those individual cities have passed. But we can apply, although Kendall is unincorporated, we can apply some of those dollars, the half-penny sales tax dollars, for instance, to create circulators in those communities.
Your response, Mr. Korge?
Yeah, look, I grew up in District 40. I know Dwight keeps telling people I don't know the district, but I actually spent the first half of my life living there. And these problems in Kendall, they're not new. This is not new. And the reality is Senator Bullard and many others in Tallahassee have had years and in some cases decades to fix some of these problems, and nothing's happened. And it's a huge mess. We desperately need east-west rail, no doubt about it. And I agree with what Representative McGee's been doing. He's a great leader, but Senator Bullard has had time, years, 8 years, to address some of these problems, and nothing's happened. So, we desperately need to take action right now. And I'll give you one other thing that we ought to be doing. The Department, I believe, of Community Affairs has, under Rick Scott, has taken away some regional planning, right? We need regional planning immediately so people can work closer to where they live. And that will ultimately decrease some of the traffic we're seeing. Now, let me also give you a 21st century solution here, and that's driverless cars. And I'll give it to Florida. We have begun implementing some laws that will allow for consumer adoption, but we need to expedite consumer adoption of driverless cars over the next 10, 15 years as an alternative way to decrease our traffic nightmare that we have all across Miami-Dade County.
But are you concerned about the kind of incidents, for example, with the young man who lost his life driving a Tesla without piloting?
The technology is not perfect, but over the next 15 years, there's plenty of time to perfect the technology and increase and expedite consumer adoption of driverless cars. And let me also say, you know, unfortunately, there's a lot of deaths from humans driving as well. So nothing is perfect, but the science and the evidence is clear. Over the next 15 years, driverless cars could drastically decrease our traffic nightmare.
Senator Bullard, you have 1 minute to rebut.
Well, as my opponents pointed out, 15 years is a long time, and he'll be long going from office if he were elected, because we understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint. So the work that I've done over the last 8 years to create alleviation of burden, or working across party lines or even across county lines, and working with elected officials around the state of Florida to deal with this burden is something that I'm very proud of. So I look forward to continuing the work, working with folks like Representative McGee, working with the chair of the Transportation Committee that I had the chance to be the vice chair of this year, to talk about the issues around driverless cars, because Senator Brandes has been one of the leading champions on that. So I look forward to continued efforts to make this a priority.
Can I get back in, Grant? Just, you know,
Briefly.
the transit tax, we passed that, 14 years ago, roughly.
Which is a county issue.
It is a county issue, but when you're a state senator, you have the bully pulpit to, you know, tell folks, look, we need to be spending that money on the right projects. And the truth of the matter is, for years and over a decade now, that money has been misappropriated. And these politicians, they don't listen to the voters. And that's a big part of the problem.
Let's move on. So the Republican Party does not have a primary in District 40 this year. State Representative Frank Artiles, who is the state representative for District 118, which also represents part of West Kendall, is going to be the Republican opponent in this year's general election in November. And I should remind voters that early voting began today in Miami-Dade County, and Election Day is August 30th. So, that being said, Representative Artiles is best known for his HB2 style, North Carolina style bill, which would legalize gender and sexual orientation discrimination, and also criminalize the act of using the bathroom for some residents, visitors, and citizens in Florida. I would like to ask you first, Andrew, do you think that is a good policy or a bad policy? And why would this be a bad policy for Florida, if so?
You know, I got to tell you, for I don't know how many decades and perhaps hundreds of years, thousands of years, people have been using the bathroom and things have been going just fine. So what Representative Artiles has done is disgusting. He should be ashamed of himself, and that bill should go in the toilet. That's where it belongs.
Do you have anything further to add? You have 2 minutes.
This is a very, look, this is, state government should not be getting involved in people's personal lives. Leave us alone. State government needs to focus on the economy, education, the environment, healthcare, and critical issues like that. Right now, our schools are ranked in the bottom half of the country. FPL has been polluting our water. Up there, including Senator Bullard, who took $25,000 from FPL recently, have been letting this happen. So leave people alone in their personal lives. Equality for all is the only option, and let's focus on the issues that impact our everyday lives that really matter: education, economy, etc.
Senator Bullard, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. And one thing that my opponent missed the vote on was the second part of that question. North Carolina suffered a $5 billion economic impact as a result of passing HB2. So when you think about that, in a tourist-driven economy like the state of Florida, any bill similar to that would be detrimental, and that's why we didn't pass it when Representative Artiles proposed it. The issue, of course, for the voters within District 40 is that you are now going to be faced with a real question, and that is, do you want a senator who has proposed such legislation representing you? And I would say that the people in District 40 and people around the state of Florida who understand and believe that discrimination is not palatable, is disgusting, and reject anyone who puts that out, who puts proposals like that out there. I would say that this is one of those issues that my opponent and I strongly agree on, in the sense that yes, it's absolutely disgusting to have any discriminatory policy put into law. I mean, as an African American male, I, for one, had witnessed discrimination even in 2016. And so anytime that the state would go as far as to legislate policy that actively discriminates against any group of people, especially members of the LGBTQ community. And I want to thank Equality Florida and Save Dade for endorsing me in this campaign, because they believe I can be the best fighter to push back against legislation like this.
Mr. Korge, you have 1 minute to rebut.
Yeah, and
or
listen,
respond.
I think this is a great moment for, Senator Bullard and myself agreeing on such a critical issue. Equality for all is the only option. Equality Florida, of course, is a big supporter, and Save Dade are dear friends. And I think it's fantastic that the Democratic Party agrees on this critical issue. And frankly, many of the folks on the right just haven't recognized that the U.S. Constitution, ultimately guarantees equality. So I think it's time to reject those who hate our fellow man because of how they were born. That's unacceptable.
Moving on. There is a $25,000 question in this campaign, and it's actually being posed by both candidates at each other. So I'm going to actually make a two-part question. I'm going to ask one question to Senator Bullard. I'm going to ask another question to Mr. Korge afterwards, but they're both the $25,000 question in this debate. Mr. Bullard, you are accused of accepting $25,000 in special interest money from FPL, and a review of your campaign finance records show that you accepted money from Big Sugar and from Next Era, which is part of FPL's parent company. So how will you be able to limit the influence of Florida's most powerful lobby while simultaneously accepting their funds?
To answer that question, is very simple. I've always sided with the people. Dante Vassell, one of the great statesmen that Florida's had, has always said that we can be willing to talk with anyone and be willing to converse with anyone on any issue. And if someone wants to donate to the campaign, they have every right. But as a legislator, as a public servant, my responsibility is to protect the people of the state of Florida. So when you look at my track record, when you look at the bills that I've sponsored, when you look at the bills that I've proposed, they've always sided with folks, whether it be rejection of plastic bags, whether it be a statewide ban on fracking, whether it be addressing issues like the school to prison pipeline or raising the minimum wage. I've never befriended big business. I've never been someone who's aligned myself with their issues. We've always understood that democracy at its core is by the people and for the people. And so as
So
the voters
why-
will ultimately discover.
Why take the money then?
Well, the reality is that campaigns require money. I mean, do I believe that Citizens United was a bad deal for the folks in this country? Absolutely. But the reality is that my opponent is well resourced, well financed. Congratulations on the success that his family has had. But the reality is that in order for me to compete with someone who has over $700,000 available to them, and that in a fund themselves, one must campaign and do that. And so,
What percentage of your overall fundraising is from FPL and Big Sugar?
a small percentage. And the reason I say that is because most of my donations have been small dollar donations, and that from the labor community, who I strongly affiliate myself with and make no qualms about that. And so when you look at contributions from FPL and contributions from Big Sugar, they pale in comparison to contributions from the hardworking people from around the state.
Mr. Korge,
I got to respond to that. I'm sorry, because that's
you're
that's
going
just
to get
inaccurate.
the chance.
Okay.
You're going to get 2 whole minutes to respond.
Thank you.
I promise. Your question is.
But can I respond before you ask me a separate
you will
question?
absolutely have 2 minutes to respond. 2 whole minutes.
Okay.
So, your question is, your campaign has in the past been accused of offering money to candidates to move seats. And you have actually moved into several races during this campaign cycle, most recently being accused by your opponent of offering $25,000 for him to switch races. How do you respond, Mr. Korge?
Before, I want to just respond to what Senator Bullard just said. You know, he mentioned Dante Fasell, who's one of the greatest public servants we've had in Miami. I knew Dante Fasell. My grandpa was Dante's campaign treasurer. Dante Fasell would never have taken $50,000 from Big Sugar and FPL, the greatest polluters we had. He never would have done that because he was better than that. And Senator Bullard said it's a small percentage of the money FPL and Big Sugar gave him. He's buying $250,000 of TV commercials to attack me over the next 2 weeks, funded with special interest money. I don't want to hear this nonsense. He sold out. That's what's happened. Okay, and the reality is, you know, the money we've been raising, yeah, we've raised money. You know who it is from? Folks who support President Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Democratic leaders around this country. That's who's funded our campaign, not FPL, who despises me because I've been calling on them to clean up Biscayne Bay for a long time. And I've also been calling on FPL to put cooling towers so the pollution doesn't get into Biscayne Bay. But in response to your specific question, okay, Senator Bullard solicited campaign contribution from me in writing, and he started talking about in text messages 2 weeks before this all came out. He talked about a fundraiser hosted by my dad, Chris Korge, and friends. It's in writing. He solicited me, and by the way, there's nothing wrong about that. There's nothing against the law with what Senator Bullard did, but these are facts. And did I commit to raise Senator Bullard money? Absolutely. There's no denying it, but he solicited me. And you know what? This is how politics works, and there's nothing improper about it. The only reason Dwight's bringing this stuff up is because he's got no record to run on. He hasn't passed one bill that's helped our community. One bill that he's sponsored, not one, has passed. If you look on the state website, next to every bill Senator Bullard has filed, it says die.
Senator Bullard, you have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you. I mean, let's unpack a lot of things. Well, let's start first and foremost by saying that, yes, my opponent did, in fact, ask me to move districts and was willing to offer $25,000 for me to move to specifically District 38.
Okay.
He wanted me to leave my home district to move to District 38. So we'll put a pin in that. Secondarily, he keeps bringing up this notion of my record and bills I haven't passed. Procedurally, in the Florida legislature, what we do is we either take up the House bill or the Senate bill whenever we're passing a bill. So the bills that I have passed, I decided to choose to allow my counterparts in the House to move ahead. So when we think about bills like anti-bullying, statutes, changing the bullying statutes here in the public school system, we think about the ability to waive liability for companies to give food to nonprofit organizations. I would think that for the homeless, I would think for the disenfranchised, that this allows them a better pathway to a better life. And that seems like something that, I don't know, the community might embrace.
So we're going to take a short break right now. Just to identify the program, this is the Only in Miami show. This is a special broadcast, and we are hosting the Florida Senate primary debate for Democratic candidates Senator Dwight Bullard and Andrew Korge. They are fighting for District 40's Democratic nomination to Florida State Senate for a district covering all of Kendall, West Kendall, Perrine, Richmond Heights, the Metro Zoo area, Country Walk, and the west side of South Miami. And it is bordered by Bird Road, US 1, the Everglades on the west, and Southwest 200th Street on the southern border. And we are in our fourth question out of 6 long format questions. The format of this debate is 2 minutes for each candidate to respond, and then 1 minute for rebuttal. We will be having a lightning round in just a few minutes. So, moving onward. One of the largest issues facing the state of Florida and impacting all of us is the availability of clean drinking water supplies. And scientists have told me that if the sea levels rise significantly, our clean drinking water in South Florida will be particularly and firstly impacted because of saltwater intrusion, which is the process by which porous limestone allows salted water into the freshwater aquifer from where we draw our water. Currently, Republican Governor Rick Scott does not say the words climate change and has banned them from the state's Department of Environmental Protection. I will ask the question first to Mr. Korge. If elected to the Florida Senate, how could you impact or change the direction of Florida's environmental regulation to protect our clean drinking water? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Grant. I just want to go back to the last thing we were talking about very quickly. You know, Senator Bullard said I tried to push him out of the district. Look, Senator Bullard and his consultant were cutting deals with people to stay or go in District 38 or 40, including FPL and a lot of other folks, including some of the Florida Alliance groups, okay? So there was a lot of wheeling and dealing in the last week when Senator Bullard was trying to figure out should he stay in 38 or go. A lot of people were a part of that. This is political tactics. It's a sophisticated political tact, and I take offense to it that he accused me of improper things. But to answer your question, okay, for years, for many years, the sea level has been rising. We know that over the next 15 years, the sea level will rise about 6 to 8 inches here in South Florida, which, as you mentioned, jeopardizes our aquifer with saltwater rising. Here's what I'm going to do if the people elect me as their state senator. I'm going to organize a tour, a trip, with some of the members who will be there for many years to come see the sea level rising, to come feel it, to touch it, to walk in it. Okay, and I'm not just going to do it on Miami Beach, because the problem is our entire coastline. It's not just Miami Beach. You're talking Homestead, Palm Beach, Broward, even in Tampa. This is happening everywhere. If the members in Tallahassee can see it and touch it and understand it, and then understand the economic impact of sea level rising, about 70% of the state's dollars come from South Florida. If the sea level rises, we're going to lose a lot of that revenue. And what are we going to do? This is a problem that impacts people on the coast. It's a problem that impacts people on the inside of the state. This is a problem that impacts everybody, and Tallahassee needs to wake up. And my question is, why hasn't one of these delegations been organized already? This is not a new problem. What are people waiting for? The time to act is right now, and only a new leader can get these things done.
Senator Bullard, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Grant. The reality is that these delegations have been organized on multiple occasions. I've taken, having represented Monroe County, I've gone down with public officials, Commissioner of Agriculture, you name it, the folks that want to come down and deal with sea level rise, because we know it's a problem. But to answer your question, the reality is the first bill that I've dedicated myself to filing is the statewide ban on fracking. We got closer than we ever could have gotten this past session, because people now understand the significant impact to drinking and potable water that fracking poses. And so that is why it has become a priority one bill for me upon getting reelected. What's fascinating in the midst of all this is the people or group of people that seem to be denying that sea levels are rising or the climate is changing are Republicans. Oddly enough, my opponent in his previous run in District 39, when he was running before, had an opportunity to pick off one of those egregious Republicans, yet chose, for some reason, to jump into a primary against someone who is being backed by the Florida conservation voters. What does that mean, Grant? It simply means this, that my track record as a bill filer, as a stalwart advocate, and as a warrior for the environment has been absolute. The reason that folks like the Florida conservation voters have chosen to back me is because that's where I stand on the side of these issues. Yet, unfortunately, due to political opportunism, my opponent has chosen to leave picking off a potential Republican and actually winning a seat for the people of the state of Florida to advocate better for these issues. He's chosen to jump into a primary against a Democratic opponent, a colleague, if you will, but more importantly, one of the more progressive members, actually the most progressive member of the Florida Senate.
Mr. Korge, you have 1 minute to respond.
The most progressive member of the Florida Senate doesn't take 25 grand from FPL and 23 grand from Big Sugar, and there's more where that came from. Number one. Number two, Senator Bullard mentions that I switched to run in a different race when I was challenging Flores. Well, the reason I did that is because Senator Bullard and Senator Flores cut a deal. It was in the Miami Herald. And part of that deal was for the Tallahassee establishment not to support me. Even Democrats, the unions were afraid to support me because of this deal that was cut. So I was put in a position where me, myself, and I and my supporters had to take on the entire Republican Party without any people from our team helping out, okay? And the sad truth is I can't compete with an entire Republican Party. We were going to get outspent 7-1, and there was zero chance we had of picking off Senator Flores. That is the truth. This is the dirty truth as to why I had no choice but to switch, because my party, the truth is, they cut a deal. Okay, Senator Bullard cut a deal with Senator Flores. You know, let me also go back.
That's time.
Sure.
That's time.
Okay.
Alrighty. This is the 5th long format question. Within your district sits the Miami Pine Rocklands, the largest natural forest community of pine rocklands outside of the Florida Everglades, and it sits alongside Metro Zoo. The last question I began with Mr. Korge, so I will give this to Mr. Bullard. Mr. Bullard, in the past, you supported legislation to create a Community Reinvestment Act area covering this natural forest community, which would have been able to enable development. They would have enabled development massively by redirecting tax increment dollars into whatever project is built. Is this a position that you still support? Do you support creating CRA Act districts over forest communities in general? And do you support development of the Miami Pine Rocklands? And more specifically, do you support the Miami Wilds project, which has been proposed by Miami-Dade County?
Well, let me say first and foremost that I totally am in support of the Pine Rocklands issue. When it came to my attention that we were potentially going to lose such a unique epicenter of ecological certainty or importance, is when I decided to stop running the CRA bill. I was running the CRA bill for, I think, a very genuine reason, and that was representing a community that post Hurricane Andrew, after the bubble burst, was in dire need of economic development, and proposals coming from the county asked for the stimulation of these areas. And so in pursuit of trying to find high-paying jobs for the district, when I was a House member, I absolutely supported expansion of the CRA. The reality is that since the Pine Rocklands have come onto my radar, I haven't pursued legislation as it relates to CRA, nor do I have any desire to pursue any legislation in the future as it relates to CRA expansion in that area for that very purpose.
Do you have anything else to add? Mr. Korge.
You know, I think Senator Bullard, this is another issue where we're going to agree on. We need to protect our home. We need to protect our environment. You can't develop too much, because the truth is we only have so many resources. We only have so much capacity as a county, as a state. You know, we can't even handle the traffic, okay, as it is today, with all the cars moving around. How can we keep adding to that without more transportation solutions? So, I think this is a real issue. And look, the environment, as a dad, as a third-generation Miami resident, there's nothing more important to me than leaving my kids and all of our children here in South Florida a better environment, a cleaner environment than the one our parents left us. So regardless of the environmental issue, that is the lens I look at any environmental or other issues for that matter, is what can we do to leave our kids a better future and give them a better future than the one our parents gave us. And I think there's a lot of issues, frankly, within the environmental space that we've got to address. Lake O, right? I mean, the toxic stuff coming out of there is disgusting. And what these corporations need to understand, because listen, I'm a business guy. What these corporations need to understand is you can't look at everything on a quarter-by-quarter basis. You got to look at things on a decade-by-decade basis. If FPL keeps allowing Biscayne Bay to be tarnished and the aquifer to be threatened, people are going to leave. They will leave Miami. that means that FPL won't have customers. So it's actually in FPL's interest to make sure that the pollution stops, that the Biscayne Bay is clean, and that our aquifer is safe and secure. And if they start looking at things on a decade-by-decade basis instead of a quarter-by-quarter basis, the environment will be cleaner, our kids will have a better future. This is very common sense. I don't know what the problem is, to be honest, other than it's time to elect some new leaders that are going to stand up to these big corporate special interests.
Alrighty, so we're going to move on to the sixth and final long format question. The state of Florida, and make no mistake, Florida state senators represent the entire state as well as their district. The state of Florida is facing an unprecedented crisis that is threatening the water quality on beaches throughout the entire state, whether it's bacteriological infections that have shut down beaches in the Panhandle, or the guacamole sludge, as they call it, that is impacting the Treasure Coast, all the way to the sewage problems that Miami Beach is facing as it tries to pump away the water that is resulting from sea level rise. As a state senator, how would you, Mr. Korge, be able to better protect Florida's beaches from essentially the corporate raiders that make up our state's big agricultural interests, namely big sugar?
Look, first I want to start on this issue with a compare and contrast, because this is important. This is a big difference between Senator Bullard and myself. In addition to Senator Bullard taking $23,000 from Big Sugar that we know about, that we can find, he also in 2013 voted for HB 999. He voted for this bill, which gave Big Sugar 30-year no-bid leases on our critical land, in addition to expediting permitting for natural gas pipelines and other dirty pipelines. Okay, so there's a huge difference between us here just on this issue. This is purely philosophical. I have publicly said on Bill Becker's show, and now I say it here, I will not take Big Sugar's money until we start cleaning up Lake O and our environment. That is very clear. That is an important distinction in this race, and I feel very strongly about this. Look, big corporations aren't the enemy. Their philosophy of emphasizing quarter-by-quarter profits over decade-by-decade strategy, that is the problem, and that is what needs to change. So big business, in my opinion, needs to look, out in a much longer horizon. Sea level rise, you mentioned again. I think Mayor Levine has done a great job on Miami Beach. I know they have some issues with the pumps, and they're pumping out some dirty stuff, allegedly.
They're pumping out human waste and sewage.
There's no doubt that that's something that needs to be looked at. We probably need better filtration systems, okay? But he's taken action. Okay, and it's saved Miami Beach. Look, I remember driving on there years ago with floods on Alton Road constantly. And
there are still floods.
There are still,
on Miami Beach.
But not as many, Grant. Not as many. Okay, look, Miami Beach is a big place. This notion that you can wave a magic wand and fix an entire community, it's just not how things work. It takes time. We need more leadership on sea level rise from Tallahassee. I will be the #1 sea level rise state senator should the people give me the opportunity to serve. There's no doubt about that. And one other thing, I've already called on Mayor Jimenez to develop a 50-year adaptation plan in decade-by-decade increments. This was about 8 months ago I did this. I worked with a big engineering firm, T.Y. Lin. They helped me build the plan, and it is very easy to do this. We can bond money now at cheap rates. We can have time to pay back the loans. This will create tons of new jobs, and it's a no-brainer for all our communities, Grant.
Okay, that is time. Thank you. Senator Bullard, you have 2 minutes to respond to this question.
Well, simply put, when you look at the millions of dollars I've been able to draw it down for infrastructure projects in my district over the time that I've been there the last 4 years, whether it be in Monroe County or some of the local municipalities in Miami-Dade, therein lies part of the problem, is that we have an antiquated infrastructure system that does not allow for the flowways of sewage and things of that nature to properly leave some of these cities. When we talk about the blue-green algae blooms, you can look back at the conversations I was having in the House when I was on the Agricultural Committee about why are we not doing better on our water quality issues? Why are we not siding with the federal government on a stricter water quality policy? But one thing I want to say in the last 15 seconds is one of our greatest resources are our people. Are our people. And one thing I find very fascinating is if people are a resource, then it's important for us to also think about things like gentrification. and the moving of people from their homes. And so when your company like Korge and Korge has their name on a soccer stadium going up in Overtown, that's going to displace thousands of families. That's an important resource too.
I'm sorry, our name's not on a soccer stadium. That's David Beckham's soccer stadium. I don't know what you're talking about. Senator Bullard, did you vote yes on HB 999, which gave Big Sugar 30-year no-bid leases?
I will answer that as soon as you tell me if your dad and you are doing any business with the soccer stadium in Overtown to displace those residents.
I'm not in that business on that specific deal. So, but yes or no, did you vote for HB 999?
Yes or no, are you guys involved in displacing thousands of families in Overtown?
The Beckham Group purchased the property from us, as you well know, but you voted for Big Sugar's bill in 2013. That's why they gave you 23 grand of campaign cheddar for making their life a lot easier. And, I think we just need to hold people accountable for this.
Please answer the question. Did you vote for that bill?
Honestly speaking, if he's got the information that says I voted yes, I'll stand by it. The truth of the matter is that I don't recall a vote that I took back in 2013. I do apologize. We pass about 270 bills annually. So if you want to hold me to one vote, go right ahead. But if you want to hold me to my true record, look at what I've done rather than.
This is his 1 minute to respond.
This is his true record. Okay, he voted for Big Sugar's bill in 2013. They gave him tons of money. He just got a $25,000 check from FPL. What do you think he's going to do now if you give him the chance to serve another 2 years? Okay, these are facts, and we just got to be honest about it. You made a mistake. It was a bad vote, Senator Bullard. Just come clean. Just be honest about it.
Something.
You will have a minute.
All right.
So it's just look. We've got to start holding people accountable for their voting record. Grant, when I came on your show a while ago, we discussed how no one pays attention to state-level politics, and that's just true. You're right. And that's why people don't know that Senator Bullard gave Big Sugar a vote in 2013, along with Senator Flores and a whole lot of Republicans. Okay, the only person who voted against it was Senator Joe Negron, who just proposed a land buy. I haven't studied it, but who just proposed a land buy to clean up this mess with Lake O. Okay, and again, we just need to start holding people accountable for their true record.
Okay, so we have ended the long format question and answer part of this debate. However, I am giving each candidate 1 minute as a general rebuttal, beginning with Senator Bullard.
It's been said time and time again about this $25,000 that I supposedly took from FPL. The reality is that money came from the Associated Industries of Florida, which has taken contributions from FPNL, has taken contributions from Publix, has taken contributions from Walt Disney World, and AIF then contributed to my PC. So if my opponent keeps wanting to characterize a lump sum of money coming directly from FPNL to my campaign, there is no track record to prove that transaction. So, but even if that's the case, even if we want to say that in the midst of that lump that FPNL was there, the idea that somehow that means that I'm beholden to FPNL as a company is overly problematic, and it really should be scary to some of the listeners that someone keeps trying to make that contribution indicative. All they have to do is look at my 8-year track record and see that many of the bills that I proposed and many of the bills that I voted against and for have been industry bills that they wanted. That guess what? They didn't get.
You have an additional 30 seconds.
Well, whether it's offshore drilling, whether it is increased funding for schools, you name it. I mean, if we want to harp on and demonize one company, that's my opponent's lane to do that. But let's think about the people, the 20 million people here in the state of Florida that have seen what true progressive leadership looks like. And that is why I've had the support of every progressive group in the state of Florida, every environmental group, every labor organization, all stand with me. For some odd reason, they seem not to want to endorse my opponent. And I would love for him to give me an indication as to why.
You have 30 seconds to rebut.
Absolutely.
Mr.
FPL
Korge
gave him 25 grand. It's from a PAC called Floridians United for Our Children's Future. The only donation to that PAC was in 2016. The whole year was $600,000 from FPL. Everyone knows this. Dwight just can't admit it. I don't know why. I just can't be honest. And Senator Bullard, the problem I have with it is that you talk about being a fighter for the people, a true progressive, but someone who fights for the people doesn't take $25,000 from the greatest polluter in Miami. They just don't do that. So it's time for change in this election, folks. These are facts. I have not taken a penny from Big Sugar or FPL. They do not
Thank
like
you,
me
Mr. Korge.
for
Thank
this
you.
reason.
Alrighty, we're going to take a short break for program identification. This is the Only in Miami show, and we will be live every night, 6 to 7 p.m., beginning September 5th. And you're listening to the Florida Senate primary debate between Democrats Andrew Korge and Senator Dwight Bullard, who are vying for the nomination for the District 40 to represent District 40, which encompasses Kendall, the west side of South Miami, Richmond Heights, West Kendall, everything west of US 1, south of Bird Road, north of Southwest 200th Street, and between US 1 and the Everglades. So we are switching to a shorter format. We are going to ask 1-minute questions with 1-minute answers. Rebuttal will be 30 seconds. So, gentlemen, I am going to start with Mr. Korge, and I would like to ask you a question about the many ballot issues that are going to be facing voters. Particularly this August 30th, there's Amendment 4, which is a solar amendment. And there is also Amendment 1, which will be proposed on the November ballot. Which amendment do you support or reject? You have 1 minute.
I support 4. When you think about solar, Grant, the problem I have with this is we should have a 10-year plan to have a full conversion, or at least a significant conversion, I should say, to solar. And it's in the big utilities' interest to do this. This is the part I don't understand, is one way or another, we're going to have tons of solar in this state over the next decade. If I was a big utility company like FPL that supports my opponent so significantly, I would want a 10-year plan, to develop it. And if I was FPL, what I would do is I would just try to create some new revenue streams from implementation of solar so they don't lose any money. This is the common sense business thing to do. Instead of just buying off politicians and giving them huge contributions like they gave to my opponent, that's what they should be doing. They should create a 10-way pathway to solar energy in Florida where they don't lose revenue, and it's actually a net neutral effect on their income.
Senator Bullard, you have 1 minute.
Strong support Amendment 4 this August and reject Amendment 1 in November. The party that I happen to be so fearlessly the leader up here locally has already supported Amendment 4. We look forward to hopefully getting that passed. Of course, we need 60% of the voters, so I'm asking all listeners to pay attention to your ballot because August 30th, Amendment 4 is so critically important.
You have 30 seconds.
Listen, Dwight and I are in agreement on this. We need to pass it. This is a no-brainer. We're the Sunshine State. There are countries in Africa, in places all around the world that have solar. For some reason, here in Florida, the Sunshine State, we don't. Next Era actually does solar in so many other states and in multiple countries. It's shocking to me that we don't have that kind of solar presence here. And again, at least have a 10-year implementation timeline. If the people give me the chance to serve them, I will work every single day to build a 10-year plan with FPL and the big utility companies to implement solar. It's a no-brainer.
On to the next question. Senator Bullard, Tallahassee is responsible for regulating for-profit colleges and universities. However, you were tied to a university that failed. How is it that you will be able to provide beneficial regulation that will restrain these private colleges from taking advantage of Floridians seeking education?
Well, we passed legislation. I voted for legislation this year that actually reins in some of those for-profit colleges. The reality is that I've been a vocal opponent of some of the tactics being used by for-profit colleges to cannibalize and mistreat the residents here in the state of Florida. When you mention tied to, it's
associated with.
I mean, I've never held a job in one. I've never worked for one. I've never gone to one. So, I mean, in terms of my ties, did I know the owner of one? Yes. I'll be the first to admit that I've befriended people in the past that I probably shouldn't have, like Mr. Korge, for instance, who is trying to gentrify the community over time.
That's such a false charge. We did sell a piece of land, or my dad did, to David Beckham. That's not gentrification. Senator Bullard not just knew the owner of Dade Medical, he went to their ribbon cutting. He's a big supporter of theirs. Okay, and the truth is these for-profit colleges are jeopardizing my generation's future and younger people's future by giving them all this debt, making false promises to get them jobs. And, I'm just tired of seeing people, get a bag of goods that's just a bunch of nonsense. Okay, look, my mother was an immigrant to this country. My Aunt Leah was a waitress all her life. These for-profit colleges, unaccredited colleges, are feeding on people kind of like my family from many years ago when they were younger. And I'm just sick and tired of it. This is why I'm running. This stuff makes me sick. I can't believe Tallahassee, people on both sides of the aisle, including my opponent, have let this happen. Our people's lives are being destroyed day in and day out. It's time we step up and say no more, okay? It's no more ripping people off, no more jeopardizing people's future, no more false promises. People need to end up in jail for some of this disgusting stuff they do. And Senator Bullard, can you apologize to people for being at that ribbon cutting with
Senator Bullard? You have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, I'm just going to use my 30 seconds to simply say that if you look at my track record as an education advocate, I've had high criticism of these for-profit colleges that again have cannibalized people's futures. We agree in the sense that people are being mistreated. But I would say this: there are some good actors in the midst of all the bad actors that are giving folks like the relatives of Mr. Korge that he pointed out a pathway to opportunity, whether it be through medical care, home health, or therapy, you name it. So I think it's important for us to not throw all the babies out with the bathwater, because there are some good actors in some of the chaos.
Alrighty, next question, 1 minute response. Mr. Korge, FP&L tried to place overhead high-energy power lines along US 1, which abuts the western side of your district. Do you support or oppose that action? And if given a Democratic majority and able to act freely, would you reform the Public Service Commission, and how?
Well, I grew up in Miami Grand. As you know, I'm a third-generation Miami resident. My family's been here since World War II. And I got to tell you, I think putting power lines above ground across US 1 like that, or along US 1, would destroy the beauty of our home. So I am absolutely against it. We need to put them underground. I know there's an added cost to that. But the truth is, the beauty of our community and the beauty of our homes is more important.
FPL knew there was an added cost, and they rejected adding that cost, even the taxpayers' expense. Would you reform the Public Service Commission if you could?
Obviously, I think that goes without saying.
How so?
We just need to put people on there who actually will do what's right for the consumers, not just for the big corporations that give everyone checks. So it's getting good people on the PSC, but the truth is, we're going to elect a Democratic governor, to really start making major progress on these issues. I think that goes without saying. That's pretty obvious. And in 2018, it looks like we're going to have some good candidates on the Democratic side. And of course, on the Republican side, Adam Putnam, who, like my opponent, has taken all the Big Sugar money and lets Big Sugar do whatever they want in Lake-O.
Okay. Mr. Bullard.
Well, I want to give a big shout out to Mayor Lerner and Pinecrest, Mayor Stoddard in South Miami, Mayor Flynn in Palmetto Bay, and Mayor Bell in Cutler Bay, who have all stood fast against FPL's development of burying lines underneath, and have also rejected the above ground lines. And I want to say that because all four of those mayors have chosen to endorse me in this particular campaign, because they understand my track record as a public servant. That being said, I stand against those lines on creeping or encroaching into the district. More importantly, when we talk about reforming the PSC, the reality is that you have to create new mandates on the PSC, or a new dynamic for the PSC, so when the governor makes those appointments, that he basically doesn't just have a pathway for cronyism, which is the current policy now. And so it's important that we do everything we can. But one thing I just want to stress is that we want to make sure that the people of Florida are protected. I think when we walk away from this, all 20 million people of Florida are going to have a clear-cut decision, both on August 30th and on November 8th. And I think my opponent and I can both agree that no one wants Frank Artilli as the senator for District 4.
30 seconds, Mr. Korge.
Senator Bullard, I would encourage you to call the mayors you mentioned and let them know you took $25,000 from FPL. I'm pretty sure they're not going to be happy with that, and no one on our side who's actually a progressive is happy with that. But, look, we've got to desperately change the PSC. We need to elect a Democratic governor. We need to win more state Senate seats. We need to build Democratic infrastructure, which I've spent a lot of time in my career, building progressive infrastructure, both here at home and around the country. We need new leaders to step up. We need new leaders with different ideas to start running at all different levels, including city commission, state house, state senate, you name it. It's time to build the democratic revolution.
Time. So our final short format question, and it will be addressed first to Mr. Korge, is, do you believe that Florida's Sunshine Law is strong enough today? And if not, what reforms would you make to hold public officials, including elected officials and candidates, more accountable by forcing open meetings and open records to be provided to Florida citizens with less fight?
Grant, when I think about the Sunshine Law, I think of activists like yourself who have great ideas on it. You're the first folks that I'll sit down with to discuss it. I hope at some point, by the way, I don't know where we are in this schedule, but hopefully we're going to talk a little bit about education and in addition to for-profit. Okay, good. Well, I appreciate that. Look, we need transparency in government. There's a lack of transparency, particularly with how people get donations from people like FPL and Big Sugar and others. There's ways to hide it. I think we need to start with a campaign to increase transparency with donations in particular, so you can see who's buying who and who owns who. So, in specifically to those Sunshine Laws.
So, who owns you in that case? Who donated the most to you?
A philanthropist who was one of Obama. Barbara Stiefel, who's a philanthropist, who was one of President Obama's biggest donors in the country, who wants nothing more than to see Florida have a clean environment, a good education system, and frankly, a Florida that is entering the 21st century. So that is my biggest donor. She's like my second mom. I wouldn't be where I am today without her, and she was a significant supporter of President Obama. She doesn't want anything except a hug and to build a more progressive Florida.
Senator Bullard, you have 1 minute.
Well, the reality is that when it comes to transparency and where we want to see things go, I agree wholeheartedly. Sunshine Laws should apply more effectively to us as state legislators. I'll be the first to say that, right? The idea that we create these laws as state officials, but then don't follow the same stringent rules that some of our county colleagues have to go by. One thing I do want to touch on, though, is this notion of ownership. I find it offensive that in the world of public service that we like to pitch these battles and create these arguments around the concept of someone owning a vote. Again, I encourage folks to look at my track record, encourage people to look at the people who endorsed me in this campaign, and more importantly, understand that to quote Shirley Chisholm, the great Shirley Chisholm, I'm unbought and unbossed, right? And what I mean by that is, no matter who contributes to my campaign, that does not create a pathway to a particular vote, to get a vote count, the ability for them to flex any muscle with me. Anyone knows that contribution to my campaign simply means that I will give them a fair opportunity to sit in my office and discuss these issues, but at the end of the day, it's all about people first. The 20 million people in the state of Florida are my priority.
You have 30 seconds to rebut.
This notion that Senator Bullard hasn't voted for the way that his big donors want is outrageous. Again, in 2013, HB 999, Big Sugar's bill, he voted in favor of Big Sugar. A lot of Democrats in the House and elsewhere did not. If you look at other corporate welfare, Senator Bullard was for corporate welfare for football stadiums and sports stadiums, billionaires stadiums. I reject that. I think that's outrageous. The truth is the billionaires don't need our tax dollars. They got plenty of money themselves. His record is not as progressive as he says, and that's just the truth.
Okay, so this is the conclusion of the debate. Each candidate will get 1 minute to make a closing statement, beginning with Senator Bullard.
Thank you, and I want to thank the listeners for tuning in. This is probably one of the more in-depth deep dives that you're going to get on a particular race. And I want to thank you, Grant, for allowing us the opportunity to have this discussion. At the end of the day, my opponent tries to couch donations to the campaign as the be-all, end-all of where someone is. My record of public service, going back to when I started off as a school teacher in 2000, all the way through my legislative service, has been one of putting people first, people power politics, and that's what I choose to assert. I think more importantly is what the people of District 40 have to remember is, do you want someone on August 30th who has actually lived in the district for the last 30 plus years, or do you want somebody who has yet to actually purchase a home or residence in District 40 representing you because they say they have better ideas? Well, guess what? Those better ideas are best rooted or residency in a district last time I checked. So I would hope that the people of District 40 would recognize that Dwight Bullard has been there, will be there, and will continue to be there.
Mr. Korge.
Thank you, Grant, and thank you to the listeners. I grew up in District 40. I spent half my life there. And the truth is, I don't need to tell your listeners that government's messed up, our society's has serious problems right now, because we all know it's true. And now is the time to start electing people who will not let Big Sugar and FPL and these big corporate interests do what they want. It's time to elect new leaders who are going to do certain things. And let me tell you what I'm going to do if you give me the honor of serving you. I'm going to fight to increase pre-K all across Florida, because I believe working families need help with preschool for their little kids like my 2 children. I'm going to fight to increase the per student funding for all school and to start teaching kids skills for the 21st century like coding, robotics, and even more basic stuff like financial literacy, so every child can thrive in the 21st century. I'm going to fight to protect our environment. Big Sugar and FPL, they're not giving me big dollars because they can't buy me, and I'm going to fight to protect our home, our future. And the truth is, every decision I make, the lens that I will look at every issue is, will this give my children and your children a better future than the one our parents gave us?
Gentlemen, thank you both for coming to the studio today. It's been my pleasure to hear both of your ideas about how to make Florida a better state. And this entire broadcast can be seen at www.onlyinmiami.co in its entirety via YouTube. So please stay tuned. We'll be back right after this break with the regularly scheduled broadcast of the Only in Miami show. Pleasure, guys. Thank you so much. Can you stop broadcast?
Thank you, Senator.
They did it.